नमः सर्वेभ्यः। ऐऐटि मद्रास् संस्थया प्रचाल्यमाने तत्र संस्कृतसमितेः आश्रये एतानि प्रवचनानि मुद्राराक्षसमधिकृत्य प्रचलन्ति। तस्य प्रायः अन्तिमः भागः एषः। So even towards the end of the sixth act, where Rakshasa and the Purusha were conversing, the Purusha was about to commit suicide. The Rakshasa is curious to know why he is committing suicide. And then he begins to tell the story of Chandanadasa. And he says, so he knows very well the close friendship between Chandanadasa and Rakshasa. But however, this Purusha pretends, of course, as per Chanakya's instructions, that he doesn't identify this Rakshasa, nor does he know about the friendship between Rakshasa and Chandanadasa. And so, as a person who is new to the situation, he is introducing the name of Chandanadasa to Rakshasa and says, there is one excellent jeweler banker, Manikara Shreshthi, by name Chandanadasa, and Rakshasa. So we can see every now and then the Swagata of Rakshasa, so full of sorrow. So he says, oh, Shoka Diksha Dwaram Daivena Apavratam. So here is the door of Shoka Diksha for me getting opened. And he advises his heart to be firm, Hridaya Sthiri Bhava. And then he was now expecting something harsh to be heard. And aloud he says, yes, of course, I have heard of the name of this good person, that he is very kindly towards his friends. What of him? And then he says, there is this Vishnudasa, who is a good friend of Chandanadasa. And Rakshasa knows about Vishnudasa also, and he anticipates something evil being befalling Vishnudasa also, and therefore in his Swagata expresses sorrow regarding that. And then he says, this Vishnudasa knew Chandragupta very well, and he made a request to Chandragupta. What is the request? He says, I have a lot of riches, amassed a good deal of money, and in exchange of that, so please release Chandanadasa. This was the request made by that fellow Vishnudasa, and Rakshasa is very happy that Vishnudasa made this gesture. He says, Sadhu bho Vishnudasa sadhu, darshito mitra snehaha. And he says, in the case of businessmen particularly, it so happens that sometimes sons kill fathers and fathers kill sons, pitrin putraha, and then putran pitaraha, abhihim santi. So they kill and torture, and friends lose friendship on account of money. When such is the situation, in spite of you being a tradesman, you have really assigned a very good goal for your wealth. As Shankara says, artham anartham bhavaya nityam. It's quite often that riches are the cause of a great deal of strife. And here in the case of Vishnudasa, he is offering all his riches for the sake of the life of his friend Chandanadasa, and therefore Rakshasa admires him, because whereas, for example, such an act may be expected easily of a Brahmana, in the case of a Shreshtin, so whose very life is after all for making more and more and more money, so that Vishnudasa is prepared to offer all his riches to Chandragupta in exchange for the life of Chandanadasa is something extraordinary and commendable. And then Rakshasa was eager to know what did Maurya Chandragupta do. And then Chandragupta has answered him in a very strict manner. So it is not for the sake of money that Chandanadasa has been bound. On the other hand, he has concealed the Amatya Rakshasa's family, and in spite of repeated requests, he is not offering them. And therefore, either he must offer them all, or else his life would come to an end. And then, so saying, this Chandanadasa has now been brought to the place to uh, of killing, and even this Vishnudasa unable to get to hear the news of the death of Chandanadasa. He has gone away from the city, and on my part, I do not like to hear the death of Vishnudasa, and therefore, before I hear that news, I wanted to end my life here, and therefore I came to this old garden. And then Rakshasa anxiously inquires whether Chandanadasa has not already been killed. And the Purusha says, well, he's about to be killed now. And uh, he's repeatedly being requested to surrender the family of Amatya, but then his loyalty to Amatya is so strong that he wouldn't offer them. And therefore, I don't want to delay my ending my life now. And then Rakshasa is so full of happiness to hear that Chandranadasa is not yet dead. And then he admires Chandranadasa and says he is comparable to sheep. And whoever has come to him for seeking refuge and help, so like Shibi, you have been so very generous. And thus, in spite of the absence of the friend, you have been amassing great fame. Yashaha nichiyate tvaya, he says. And then he says, well, man, please go and inform um, your friend Vishnudasa. So prevent him from entering into the fire. And I will set free Chandanadasa from death. And then the Purusha asks, as if puzzled, so by what means are you going to prevent the death of Chandanadasa? So how are you going to set him free from death? And then the Rakshasa says, look here, look at my sword. This is a sword that has seen several battles and is unfailing, and therefore I am taking up this adventure, and therefore I will set my friend free using my sword. And then the Purusha says, well, this will be something most dangerous and risky. He first says, well, that you speak of, he's addressing Amatya and says, that you speak of granting the life, saving the life of Chandanadasa, so makes me suspect, are you Amatya Rakshasa by any chance? Kim Sugrihita Namadheya, Amatya Rakshasa Padaha Yuyam, Dishya Drishtaha. So, and please clarify my doubt. And he immediately saying these words, he falls at the feet of Amatya Rakshasa. And then Amatya Rakshasa does identify himself and says, well, I am the person who has seen with his own eyes the death of all my seniors, my lords. So the entire Nanda Vamsha he is referring to. And I am the person who is responsible for the death of my friend. So it is now Chandanadasa. I am the Anarya. I am the person with a bad name, Durgrihita Namadheyaha, Yathartho Rakshasa. I am truly a Rakshasa. You can see the play on the word Rakshasa at several points in this play. And then the Purusha now once again falls at the feet of Rakshasa, and but full of joy, and says, Ascharyam Dishtya Drishtosi. Luckily, I have seen you. And Rakshasa says, so go and tell Vishnudasa now that Amatya Rakshasa is going to save the life of Chandanadasa. And he once again utters the same words to the prowess of his sword. So Nistrimsha is sword. And then the Purusha asks, may we please, sir, now Shakatadasa has been taken to the very place of guillotine, and one thing that I have to inform you is that what happened in the case of Shakatadasa. When he was about to be put to death, some people came and saved his life and took him away. And Chandragupta came to know of this, and he became very furious, and he actually put to death the persons responsible for this. That is to say, those who were irresponsible, and they let Chakatadasa escape. And thereafter, what has happened is that the executioners have become extremely careful, and if they see anyone holding any weapon somewhere nearby, in front or in back or any side, so the moment they see somebody with some weapon, they put to death the person who is about to be put to death very immediately. So therefore, um, he is ultimately preventing Amatya Rakshasa from carrying the weapon. And saying these words, he says, if you indeed carry this weapon with you, you'll only be hastening the death of Chandanadasa. That is to say, before Amatya reaches Chandanadasa, Chandanadasa will be no more. Saying these words, he goes out. So exit that Puksha. And Rakshasa is now left alone, and he says, oh, it's impossible to penetrate the course of the polity of Chanakya. Durbodha, Chanakya Vatoho Niti Margaha. He still refers to Chanakya as a Vatu. So still so young. So Rakshasa is so senior and Chanakya is so young. And then he says, I am really puzzled. If it was the fact that Shakatadasa was saved by people who were actually spies of Chanakya, but then why, for that reason, were the persons who set him free those executioners were killed by Chandragupta Maurya? And then, if the truth is otherwise, why would Shakatadasa cheat me? So I am not able to clearly ascertain what the truth of the matter is. So at every stage, Chanakya leaves Rakshasa completely puzzled, and then he thinks over what is the best way out for him. So now it is very clear that if he carries the sword with him, Chandanadasa's death will be very immediate, and it will be done very effectively, and therefore it is no use. Therefore, Nayam Nistrimshakalaha. And nor is this the time for any kind of diplomacy or whatever. So this Rajaniti method, there is no time for that because it takes its own sweet time to bear fruit. And thirdly, I cannot be indifferent because it is for my sake that my friend Chandanadasa is meeting this situation of imminent death. And therefore, there is only one way left for me, namely exchanging my body for Chandanadasa's. That is to say, Amatya Rakshasa would go and offer his own body. So all that Chanakya and Chandragupta were insisting upon and repeatedly demanding was the surrender of the family of Chanakya, if the family of Amatya Rakshasa, and if Amatya Rakshasa himself is present there offering his own body in exchange for the body of Chandanadasa about to be put to death. So that is to say, kill me and don't kill Chandanadasa. If that is the offer that is being made by Amatya Rakshasa, then definitely my friend's life will be saved. So saying, he goes out, and with this, the sixth act comes to an end, and we are left with the second act, the last act, the act which is rather brief. So then enter the two executioners. The name of one is Vajraloma and another is Bilopatra. As we get to know a little later, that is almost towards the very end of the play, these two are none but Siddharthaka and Samidharthaka, who have come in the guise of executioners. In the sixth act itself, the indication was very clearly given in the conversation of Siddhartha and Siddhartha that they had to dress themselves as the executioners and appear as chandalas, so who are employed as executioners. And so it is these two persons who have come and they are speaking in Prakrita. So, and Vajraloma says these words. So it is as though a general call to the people who were assembled there or whoever. So he is asking them to clear the path because they are going to bring Chandanadasa to be put to death there. And therefore, he is making the general announcement that if you want to save your life and then your riches and your family and your wife and so on, then there is one thing that you must necessarily do, namely, Pariharata Rajapatyam. So give no offense to the king. That is the most dreadful thing. Vishamam Rajapatyam Pariharata Sudurena. So never give any chance, because we have heard of the word apatya in the case of Ayurveda, and when a person falls ill and so on. So he contrasts the general apatya with rajapatya and says, when a person is ill, then a normal person, when he takes recourse to apatya, either he will fall ill or he'll die ultimately. Sevite apatye. But in the case of Rajapatya, so the entire family comes to an end. And he says, if you don't believe that, look here. So here is a positive example, because here is this Shreshtin Chandanadasa who has done Rajapatya, so who has offended the king, and he is now being taken to the Vadhyasthana, the place of execution, along with his wife and son. So Saputra Kalatram. And then he also says, as though speaking to somebody at a distance, so are you asking, is there some way of setting this Chandanadasa free? And he says, it's only possible only if he surrenders the family of Amatya Rakshasa. So otherwise, well, that he will go heavenwards, he is now very clear. And then the second executioner comes there, that is Bilopatra. He comes there, bringing with him Chandanadasa, who is Vadhya Veshadhari, dressed as a person who is about to be killed, and he is also carrying the shula, so on which he will be now Aropita, and therefore carrying that he is coming there. And Chandanadasa's words, so full of tears, alas, I am a person who has done no offense, and I was always afraid that I may lose my character or some such thing, and therefore it is very horrifying that I am being meted out a kind of death that is fit for a thief, for a criminal, and I must go down to Kritanta Aryama, who metes out such treatment to even people who care for their virtue and character so much. And he says, well, in the case of persons who are utterly heartless, there is no difference between a person who is indifferent to things and a person who is actually involved in some crime. And he gives the analogy of hunters who kill deer, and the deer have in no way offended anyone, and they only subsist on some grass, and in no way they give offense to anybody. And still the hunters are ruthless in killing them, and so are we in the case of Yama. And looking around, he says, Chandanadasa, he thought that Vishnudasa, who is so dear to him, would come there at the moment of death. So, but Vishnudasa is not seen, and he's a bit depressed and distressed, and says, oh Vishnudasa, you don't even answer my cries. So, And he says, well, in the case of people who are in deep distress, um, even friends won't appear there. So they won't be there with them. So he's actually mistaking Vishnudasa to be a Dware Shmashane Yastishtati Sa Bandhavaha. So the person who is there, when a person is being honored in a very great manner at the Rajadwara or at the Shmashana where he is dying, so he is about to be cremated. So a true relative is a person who would be there at moments of joy and moments of sorrow, and then who my friends are showing their reaction only by shedding tears, and all that I can see is their face full of sorrow, and uh, only some are following me. And then Vilupatra says, well, Mr. Chandranadasa, you have now come to the place of execution, and please dismiss all your family members. And Chandranadasa now speaks to his wife and says, dear wife, so now return now along with your son. So it is not possible to follow me any further. And the wife, full of tears, reminds him, you are going not to some other country that they can come up to, say, the railway station and bid him goodbye and return. So, paralokam prasthitaha aryaha na deshantaram. So, it's not to some other country that you are leaving. You are leaving this world and going to another world. And Chandradasa says, look, I am dying on account of my task of my friend. Mitrakaryena me vinashaha na punah purushadoshena. So it's not for some crime that I have committed that I am dying now, and therefore don't grieve here at all. Tadalam vishadena. And then she says, well, in such a case, it's not proper for me to return from this point. And then Das is not able to figure out what is it that you are trying to do, trying to say. And then she speaks of Sahagamana, so following the husband in his moment of death. Bharatushcharana manugacchantyaha atmanugraho bhavatu iti. So even as I follow you at your moment of death, so it is that is going to be that is a favor to me, and that is what I am doing. I am doing a favor to myself. So what you must note in this context is that Sahagamana was something that has always been held in very high regard in our heritage, and even though it has been made a sort of a law that even to glorify that is something that goes against law and all that. You can see that, for example, in the case of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So when Dasharatha dies, none of his wives do the Sahagamana. In Mahabharata, Madri does that. And actually speaking, there is a competition between Kunti and Madri as to who should do the Sahagamana, and each argues the case for him herself and so on. And thus there was no imposition at any point of time on the wife to do Sahagamana. It was utterly voluntary, and it was only in the case of an extraordinary love that would happen. And that is not a very regular thing either. And there is nothing imposed either in the Dharma Shastras or by way of law or social pressure to a person to do this Sahagamana. And Chandradasa is very unhappy because if she does that, what is the fate of the child? So, Durubhya Vasitamidam, your resolve is unwise. Look at the face of the child, and he's still too small. If he had somewhat come of age, and he would be able to take up his own responsibilities very well and all that, it was something different. But this is a child, very young, and therefore he does not know the Loka Vyavahara, and therefore you cannot do this. And then Kodabini says, for the sake of this, I am praying to my Kula Devataha. So, Anugranhantu Enam Prasannaha Devataha, and she asks the child to fall at his feet, fall at the feet of the father, the final salutation that the child can make. And the child follows the defeat of the father and asks for the task that remains to be done. So, what is it that I should do? Asking for general advice. And Chandranadasa says only one thing: live in a country where Chanakya is not Chanakya Virahite Deshe Vasitavyam. That's the only advice that he can think of giving. And then this Bilvapatra, the execution, is reminding him um, the stake has been planted now, so get ready for execution. And the wife is crying, Aryaha Paritrayadham. So she's asking for help. And Chandranadasa says, why do you cry in vain? And in the case of those who are gone to heaven, the divinities themselves look down with pity and compassion. In the case of those who have been grieved on account of the person who has gone to heaven, and he reiterates his statement that Mitra Karyena me vinashaha na yukta karyena. It is only on account of some good task for the sake of my friend that I am dying, and not because of any crime that I might have committed. And therefore, kim harshasthane pradyate. This is a moment where you have to be happy because you are doing a noble task. And why do you cry at this moment? And then Vajraloma is now advising Bilvapatra, the executioners are now getting busy with their own task. So take hold of Chandanadasa, and then these family members, they will return on their own. Otherwise, no amount of persuasion will make the family members return. And certainly, Chandanadasa himself cannot be expected to send family members away, and therefore take Chandanadasa away. And then Bilvapatra does so, and Chandanadasa says, just a moment, let me have an embrace. So with my child, and then he embraces his child and sniffs in his head. And right then, the Jata avashyam bhavitavye vinashe mitrakaryam samadvahamano vinasham anubhavam. Well, death is certain, nobody can escape death. Remember that I am dying for the sake of my friend. So I am carrying out my friend's duty, and I am dying on account of that. He wants to make that clear to his own son. And the child is also a worthy child and says, do you have to spell this out? So this is our Kuladharma. Kuladharma khalu eshaha asmakam. And then Vajraloma says, well, take hold of this fellow and the two Chandalas. So now they physically hold Chandanadasa and Kutumbini, the wife. So once again, so beating her breast, cries, help, and so on. Then enters Rakshasa. So with the sudden toss of the screen. So whenever, generally in Sanskrit plays, all characters enter the stage only with a prior invitation. And only in some cases where sudden entry is made, the stage direction is apatikshepena or patakshepena with the tossing of the screen. So there is something that to indicate that something totally unexpected is happening. And Rakshasa says, do not be afraid, lady, bhavati nabhetavyam. And he addresses the hangman, bho bhoho shulaitanaha, nakhala vyapayitavya Chandanadasa. Now don't put to death Chandanadasa, because this is Chandanadasa who has done a very great act of sacrifice, and put this Vadhya Sraku, the garland of death of the person to be put to death, upon me and not on this person, Chandanadasa. So he says, I am a Vedishik person because I am fit to be put to death, because I saw right in front of my eyes my own king, so all put to death and killed. And then when my friends were in great distress, I was very calm and unperturbed. And thus it is me who is fit to be a guest of the Mrityuloka rather than this person, Chandanadasa. So, and therefore, let me be killed rather than this person be. And then Chandradasa looks at Amatya and he is obviously surprised and he asks Amatya Kimidam, what is this? So he's full of tears and full of surprise and asks him, and then Rakshasa says in a somewhat enigmatic manner, oh, it's but a small fraction of what you are doing, which is to say that for the sake of his own friend, that is Amatya Rakshasa himself, Chandranadasa is offering his own life, and he has also done a greater sacrifice this long, having been in jail and so on and so forth, and therefore I'm only doing just a small portion of what you have done. And then Chandranadasa is quite puzzled. So he says, what all I did has been made fruitless, as it were. Sarvamapi imam prayasam nishphalam kurvata tvaya kimanashpitam. What is it that you do then? In the sense that Amatya had resolved to defeat Chanakya and Chandragupta. No sign of, not the slightest sign of that is to be seen anywhere here. And here is Amatya at the, so he had taken a vow as it were that he would not enter into Pataliputra without finishing Chandragupta and Chanakya. And he, of course, he doesn't have even a sword in hand. So it's very obvious. And then Rakshasa only says, well, all I did was for my selfishness. So he's in such a desperate situation. And in the desperate state of mind, he says, Swartha eva napita. What did you do? I did only Swartha, he says. And therefore, he says, rebuke me no more. And he says, please inform that wretched fellow Chanakya. Bhadra nivedyatam duratmane Chanakyaya. And the executioner asks him, what should I inform Chanakya? And he says, well, here is this person. Yeshos means Saha. And I am now fit to be killed by you. Tavagato vadhyatvam. So, this person, Chandranadasa, is in this Kali age. He has amassed the fame of Shivi and of the Buddhas. So he is a person of a very pure mind, and it is for the sake of his saving his life that I have come, and therefore that please inform that it is Amatya who has come. And then Vajraloma advises Bilvapatra to take Chandanadasa and stand beneath a tree in the cemetery. So Shmashana Padapachayayam. So by when I will myself go and inform Chanakya that Amatya has arrived here. And Vajbilapitra says yes and takes Chandanadasa along with the son and the wife. So exit all these three persons. And Vajraroma and the Rakshasa are there on the stage then. So Vajraloma has now, eighth Amatya is taking the minister Amatya and moving about along with Rakshasa. He says, who is here? So go and inform Chanakya. And the adjectives and epithets he uses for Chanakya, they hurt Rakshasa. He says, Nandakula Nagakulishasya. Chanakya is like the thunderbolt weapon for the mountains in the form of Nanda Vamsha. So Indra's thunderbolt, according to our Puranas, is the one that cut off the wings of the mountains, and it is such an act that Chanakya has done. And Mauryakula Pratishtapakaya, and he is the person who has established the Mauryakula, enthroned Mauryakula. So Arya Chanakyaya. And Rakshasa says to himself, oh, I had to hear even these things. So that is, even before Vajraloma had completed the sentence, this is the Swagata of Rakshasa. And then Vajraloma continues and he says, here is Amatya Rakshasa who has been capture now. So, and his buddhi and purushakara, that is to say, his prajna and vikrama, have all been bound completely by the polity of Chanakya. Arya Niti Sanyamita. So, that is to say, neither his intellect, neither the intellect of this Amatya Rakshasa, nor his prowess, he is also known for his prowess, so are able to function now, and therefore, in a way, he has come to surrender, and therefore, such Amatya has been captured. And then enters Chanakya there. Now we no more see here Chandanadasa and his family. So it is a crucial moment of meeting between Chanakya and Amatya Rakshasa, and therefore there is to be nobody else here now. So then enters Chanakya, only his face visible, his body fully covered, and then Chanakya is saying that he is speaking to Vajraloma. So, well, um, who is it that has tied fire in the skirt of his garment, tying up fire in the skirt of his garment, and who has, with his pasha, brought wind to a halt, and who is it that has put the lion into the cage, and who has crossed the ocean with just his arms, the ocean which has numerous crocodiles, which is to say that Chanakya has done tasks as arduous as these. And Vajraloma says, well, sir, it's only by your good self. So, Niti Nipuna Buddhina Aryena. And then Chanakya says, oh, do not say so. Rather, it was all done by Daiva or fate, which had come to hate Nandakula. Nandakula Vijveshana Daivena iti bruhi. And Rakshasa says to himself, I am Duratma Athava Mahatma Kautilya. Now here is Kautilya, who is a Duratma, a wicked man, or rather a Mahatma or a great man. So puzzled Chanakya is, the Rakshasa is regarding Chanakya. And he also says, Sarvashastranam. So this Chanakya is a person who is a repository of all the Shastras. Ratnanam Yosagraha, like the ocean having all its gems. And yet, I'm not quite happy at all his merits because I am only jealous of him, he says. So because of my malice, I'm not able to admire him. So all this, of course, he says in his Swagata. And then now Chanakya looking at, so he's gotten closer and looking at Amatya, he says, Aye, Aso Amatya Rakshasaha. And he says, for a long time, he has been the cause of exertion for the army of Chandragupta and my own intellect, which is to say, Rakshasa had posed challenges and formidable challenges to both the intellect of Chanakya and to the army of Chandragupta Maurya. So, both in regards to Prajna and Vikrama. So, these are spoken of right in the beginning in the opening act. So, we see that the essential principles are consistently maintained throughout the play. And it is this Amatya Rakshasa who poses such formidable and insurmountable challenges to my own intellect and to the army of Chandragupta. So it is this person here. And in fact, both of them had to spend many sleepless nights on account of this. And then, removing his veil, Chanakya goes near Rakshasa and says, Vishnuguptoham Abhivadaye. So here is Chanakya bowing down to Amatya Rakshasa. And Rakshasa, so he addresses Rakshasa as Amatya Rakshasa, Bhoho Amatya Rakshasa, Vishnuguptoham Abhivadaye. And Amatya in his Swagata says, well, he's calling me Amatya, and I am now ashamed of this adjective. Amatya iti lajjakaram idanim visheshanam. And then aloud he says, Vishnugupta, do not touch me because I have been touched by these Chandalas. So Chandala sparsha dushitam, so do not touch me. And Chanakya says, Amatya Rakshasa, these two persons are not Chandalas. So Chanakya knew very well that this situation would arise, and therefore he had ensured that his own disciples, so Siddharthaka and Samidharthaka, to dress as executioners and Chandalas, and therefore he says these two are not Chandalas, and these two persons are, see, Siddharthaka, whom you know so very well, and this second person, Samidharthaka, is also a Rajapurusha, is an officer. And then he clarifies that the letter written by Shakatadasa, so that Kapata Lekha, was got done by me only. So the moment Chanakya meets Amatya Rakshasa, he clarifies, actually in the conversation to follow immediately, also he clarifies all doubts in the mind of Amatya. Amatya was very, very confused as to what exactly was happening, and he was really taken aback that the persons whom he trusted most, so all left him in the lurch, and they were not helpful and all that. So, and then Rakshasa says to himself, Dishtya Shakatadasam Pratyapaneto Vikalpaha. So I trusted Shakatadasa so much, and I had come to suspect Shakatadasa so much. Now with this one word of Chanakya, so all of that doubt has been dispelled. You must note that Chanakya doesn't relent till he makes Amatya accept the ministership of Chandragupta. And Chanakya says, why speak more? Let me put it all in a nutshell. Sankshepatah kathayami. And he says, those persons, Bhadra Bhatta and others, number one. And number two, and then that Kapata Lekha, that letter itself, and then that Siddharthaka, and then the three Alankaras, the golden ornaments, and your friend, that Bhadanta, that Jain friar, and then the person who was about to commit suicide in that old garden that you came across. So even that person. So and the sort of the torture that was given to Chandanadasa was all on account of me. And Ityardhokte Sarvam Me. So all this is what has been done by me. And the moment he has to say done by me, he feels a bit shy. Ityardhokte Lajjam Natayan. And he says, all this was done by my policy, my Naya, so my act of polity, in order to bring out the union between yourself and Chandragupta. So I wanted you to join Chandragupta. So, and it is for the sake of that that is already this been done by me. And he says, Chandragupta now, so you may say him now. And Rakshasa, all his doubts are clarified, and he is happy in a way. And then he says, Kagatihi Esha Pashyami. So what other choice do I have? Okay, let me see him. Then enters Chandragupta. So we are almost coming very close to the end of the play. And Chandragupta says to himself, without any warfare whatsoever, Vinaiva Yuddhat, Aryana Jitam Durjayam Parabalam, the inconquerable army of the enemy has been conquered by Ari Chanakya. And I am indeed ashamed of it all. Lajjita evasmi. Because the situation now is that all my arrows are there in my quiver, and the position of the arrows is that, see, the crest of the arrow is towards the bottom of the quiver, and he says it is as though on account of a sense of shame that these arrows are crestfallen so in my quiver. And then he says, with persons like Chanakya, I could even be, I could even keep sleeping and they will take care of everything. So even if my bow is just unstrung, there's nothing for me to worry about. So I got such wonderful gurus to lead me who are ever vigilant regarding the tasks that they have to do. And then he goes down to Chanakya. So Arya Chandragupta Pranamati. And then Chanakya says, uh, well, all your desires have now been fulfilled, O your Prishala, O Chandragupta. Here is Amatya Rakshasa who has arrived and bow down to him. So the Abhivadaya, Abhivadayaswa, Patra Bhavantam, Amatya Mukhyam. So the chieftain, the chief minister, so Amatya, so bow down to him. And Rakshasa to himself, he says, well, we have now been united with Chandragupta. Yojito anena sambandha. And then Chandragupta approaches Amatya Rakshasa and says, here is Chandragupta bowing down to you. So Chandragupta abhivadayate. And Rakshasa to himself, he says, oh, this is this Chandragupta, the boy. Even as a boy, I had expected a great growth in him, that he would come up in life well. And he is like now a lordly elephant which is leading its group. And aloud he says, Rajan Vijayaswa. So the spark of fire in Chandragupta, Rakshasa had already noticed. So Chandragupta is very young, and Rakshasa is, of course, the senior most here in the entire group. And he wishes well and blesses him, be victorious, O king. And Chandragupta says, well, when you say Vijayaswa, what is it that can remain unconquered by me? Because I have two Aryas, Aryech Jagrati. That is, one is Arya Chanakya and another is Arya Rakshasa. When these two persons are there to support me and help me and guide me, so what can there be in the world that I may not conquer? And then Rakshasa to himself says, this person is approaching me like a servant. Sprashati mam bhritya bhavena kokili shishyaha. Or rather, this is indeed the Vinaya of Chandragupta. So his active courtesy and sweetness and the obedient nature. And it is only my matsarya, my malice, that has been construing things in the opposite manner. And he also says, no wonder Chanakya is successful in his enterprise, because even though a minister may be extraordinarily brilliant, it is only when he is championing the cause of a jigishu person, who is a worthy person, that he can be successful. Jigishu is a person of high aspiration, and if there is the right candidate who is the jigishu, so it is only then that the science of polity, the mastery of the science of polity can all bear fruit. On the other hand, if the jigishu is an adravya, if he is an unworthy person, then no amount of effort on the part of the minister can really save him and make him succeed. So Vishuddha Nayopi Mantri, so even when his policies are all excellent, that won't work. So he gives the comparison of a tree on the bank of a river. So going to the flow of the river, the banks will keep getting slackened, and the tree is bound to fall one day or the other if it is too close to the bank of the river. And similarly, in the case of Amatya Rakshasa, he was espousing the cause of Ismaitu and others. So who was not a proper jigishu after all, compared to Chandragupta. There was nothing in comparison to Chandragupta. Malaiketu was no comparison. And this Ari Chanakya has taken up the cause of Chandragupta, who is a Dravya Jigishu, whereas in the case of Maliketu, the case is not the same. So this is what he says all in his Sogata. And then Chanakya is still, even though Amatya Rakshasa has come round and all that, Chanakya is still quite strict, and he asks him formally, categorically, Amatya Rakshasa, do you want Chandanadasa to live? So, Api Ishite Chandanadasasya Jeevitam. And Rakshasa says, Vishnugupta, what doubt is there? And then Chanakya says, the point is that if you have no Shastra in your hand, that you are doing the Anugraha for Chandragupta cannot be fully believed. And therefore, take this Shastra. Saying so, Chanakya offers his own sword. So if you want to ensure that Chandranadasa continues to live, and that he should not be put to death, then take this sword, which is to say he is handing over the charge, his own charge to Rakshasa. And Rakshasa says, no, Bhovishnugupta Mamaivam, Ayogyaha Vayamasya. So I am unfit to handle the sword that has been handled by you, Visheshataha Tvaya Grahitasya Grahane. So I cannot hold in my hand the weapon that you have had been holding so all this time. And look at the sense of sacrifice of Chanakya, that he wants to hand over the ministership to Rakshasa, and himself he would go away for tapas, though it has not been explicitly stated here. He wanted all the wisdom of Rakshasa, so plus his high sense of loyalty to the king that he was serving. So that will stand in good stead for Chandragupta. And therefore it is that Chanakya wants that Rakshasa accepts the ministership of Chandragupta. And Chanakya says, Amatya Rakshasa, Yogyo Aham, Ayogyo Bhavan iti kathamiti. How can anyone say that I am Yogya and that you are Ayogya? Look at this vast army of horses and elephants. It's all on account of you. Obviously making a reference to the vast army that Maliketu and Amatya Rakshasa had amassed, so collecting various kings over to their side and so on. So all this does bespeak of Amatya Rakshasa's brilliance in amassing the help and support of so many people. And once again, Chanakya makes it clear that if you do not accept this, note that Chandanadasa's life cannot be saved. And then Rakshasa in his Swagata says, Nanda Sneha Gunaha Sprishanti Hridayam Dhrityosmita Vidvisham. So the kind of friendship that was shown by the Nanda kings, so they still touch my heart, but here I am, a servant of his enemies, and so on. And then finally, he says, there is no other go, I accept this. Namas Sarvakarya Pratipatti Hetave Suhat Snehaya. So it is the Mitra Sneha that is impelling me to do this. Otherwise, he cannot save the life of Chandanadasa. And therefore, he says, I bow down. Esha Prahos me. I am humbled. And Chanakya gladly offers the Shastra, the sword, to Amatya Rakshasa and says, Vrishala, Amatya Rakshasena Idani Manigrihiti. Oh, Chandragupta, you have now been favored by Amatya Rakshasa. Congratulations to you. And then Chandragupta says, it's only your own grace that I'm experiencing. Arya Prasadaha eva Chandraguptena anubhaviti. And there is the entry of a servant who comes and makes this announcement. Sir, Malayaketu has been arrested by the important persons like Bhadra Bhatta and Bhagurayana, etc. And his hands and feet have been chained, and he has been brought here. So what next is to be done? Please command. So, and then Chanakya says, okay, communicate this to Amatya Rakshasa. He's already given charge to Amatya Rakshasa to take decisions. So, and what does Rakshasa feel about this? And Rakshasa to Miss Swagata says, so just now he has made me his servant. And then here is Chandragupta, Chanakya making me give instructions and take decisions, but he has no other go. So Kagati. So Rajan Chandragupta, so he addresses Chandragupta and now takes the decision, gives the decision. So you know very well that I have stayed with Malaiketu for quite some time, and therefore it's my plea that his life also be spared. So don't kill Malaiketu for treason, for his act of treason, and so please save him. And Chandragupta still looks at the face of Chanakya, and Chanakya says, well, the first request of Amatya Rakshasa should be honored, and therefore spare the life of Malaiketu. And then he addresses the Purusha. Chanakya himself addresses the Purusha, the servant who had come and given the news, and says, requested by Amatya Rakshasa, Chandragupta has taken this decision, namely that the kingdom that belonged to Malaiketu's father, that will be given away to return to Malaiketu. So his life is not only spared, but his father's kingdom is duly returned to him. So that way the friendship of Malaiketu is also now guarded by Chanakya. And then you may please now go along with Malaiketu and ensure that he is enthroned. And after that celebration is over, get back here. And then the Purusha says yes, and he leaves the place. And then one more thing he says, tell this to the Durgapala, the fort commandant, namely Vijayapala, namely that Chandragupta is mightily pleased by Amatya Rakshasa coming over to him, and Chandragupta is making this command, namely this Chandana Dasa was about to be put to death. He must be made Sarva Nagara Shreshthi as the trader in chief of all the cities. So Sarva Nagara Shreshthi Padam Aropitam, and then excepting the horses and the elephants, all who had been arrested may be set free. So, and then he says, when Amatya Rakshasa is now leading us all, what is the use of, what's the point in having all these? And therefore, Vina Vahana Hastibhyaha Muchitam Sarvabandhanam, and my pratigna has been carried out in full, and it's now that I can fasten my tuft once again, Badhyate Shikha. So happily, Purna Pratigna Maya, my mission is over. And the Purusha says, yes, sir, and exits the Purusha. And then Chanakya asks Chandragupta and Amatya Rakshasa, so is there something dear to you that I have to accomplish? And Chandragupta says, what's there more dear to me that needs to be accomplished? Two things or three things so have been accomplished already, and what more is required? What are those three things? One is friendship with Rakshasa once again. So he was the brain behind the enemy forces, the Mlecha kings and so on. He had gone over to that side, and now that he has been made to come here and work with us, so lead us and guide us, that has been achievement number one. And number two, you got me the kingdom, so you have made me the king. And number three, the Nandas, they have all been uprooted. And what's there more for me to ask? And Rakshasa says, Tathapi idamastu. So, well, we could still aspire for this. So, with these words, we are coming to the Bharatavakya, the day wherein all the factors come on this stage and sing this Bharatavakya in chorus. So the Rakshasa says, so these words, Varahi Matmayone Stanamavana Vidha Vastitas Yanurupam Yasya Pragdanta Kotim Pralaya Parigata Shishriye Bhutadhatri Mlechai Dvijyamana Bhujayuga Mudhana Samshita Rajamurte Sashri Mad Bandhurtyaha Chiramavatu Mahim Parthivat Chandragupta. So may King Chandragupta protect this earth. So along with his relatives and servants who are all endowed with richness. So may he protect this earth. So the earth was being agitated by Mlechas, Mlecha, and now Chandragupta has become the king, and may he save this earth. And he gives the analogy of how in the Puranas it has been detailed how the earth herself, Bhutadhatri, refers to the earth at the time of Pralaya. So then when she was this under the influence of Madhu and Kaitava, etc., the Varaha Avatara took place. So and then assuming the Varaha Murti, Varahi Matmayone Tanum Avana Vidhau. So in the act of protection, Astitasya Anurupam Yasya Prag Danta Kotim Pralaya Parigata Shishriye Bhutadhati. So upon the pair of tusks of the Varaha, so the earth was now placed and she was protected. And even so may Chandragupta protect this earth, which is now being agitated by the Mlechas. So that is with that the Bharatavakya comes to an end and the plays comes to an end. The one message that the play evidently has is that the earth was being agitated by the Mlechas then, and even to this day, in our present context, also the same Mlechas are agitating our kingdom. So we see, for example, the Islamists and the fundamentalist Christians and the communists. So they are trying to wreck the country from within, which is a greater danger. And we must identify our true enemies and our true friends and ensure that none of our own bright and brilliant people go over to the enemy camp and serve them. But on the other hand, they are made to serve our motherland in a proper manner. And this fight of Arya Chanakya against the Mlecha hordes is an important lesson for us even to this day. So with this message, I think you can bring this series of talks on Mudrarakshasa to an end. And is there, I think, one or two questions there? Somebody had one question. If there is any question, you may please ask.
Pranam sir, I have a question.
I'm not able to hear.
Pranam sir, I have a question. Yeah, so the question is, even after Amartya Rakshasa gained the trust of Chanakya and he was honored by him and he was made a king, why is he still referred to as a Rakshasa?
Why?
Why is he still referred to as a Rakshasa in the text?
No. Rakshasa is just his name. It is not some epithet and it's not an adjective to condemn him or deride him. It's a name. It's a regular name. And therefore, we don't have to take the word Rakshasa in a negative spirit. So it's only on occasions that there is a play on the word and Rakshasa calls himself a Rakshasa or somebody else calls him a Rakshasa or whatever. So, but actually speaking, there is only his name. So why he was named so is a sort of a puzzle. But as I referred to earlier also this question was asked as to why he was named Rakshasa, and we can only give the explanation. I have not come across any explanation as that, but we can only think of the explanation as something like this. So, for example, during the plague that our country witnessed, say, some 50 years ago or so, slightly more perhaps. So many people were dying, and that was the reason for naming the children as Gundana. So, for example, Gundappa and Devi, the famous Devi Gundappa is also named like that. So, Gundappa or Gundana. So, which refers to a piece of stone. So, a round piece of stone. And it is that which can survive in spite of so many the cataclysms and catastrophes that are happening all around. Or sometimes somebody is named Tippe Swami. So Tippe, as in Tamil, it only refers to a mass of garbage. So people are named after this garbage, this mass of garbage. But it is only to do it is something like the Drishti Prihara, and it is something like on the top of building we have a sort of a Rakshasa figure. So which is said to avert many evil things and so on. So just because it occupies the highest position on the building, on top of the building we have a sort of a Rakshasa Murti. It doesn't mean that it's the residence of Rakshasa, but it is something that is meant to do away with the influence of Rakshasas. So it is some such thing, that's all. So it's not that Rakshasa has been belittled or condemned with the epithet Rakshasa, but his name is Rakshasa. Yes.
Kannan sir, I have a question too.
Please.
I wanted to know why that Chanakya, in spite of all his machinations and in spite of going to such great lengths to convince Amatya Rakshasa, how is it that he agrees to his request for sparing Malaiketu's life? Wouldn't it have been like? I mean, I thought that was part of eliminating Malaiketu was a plan along with hiring Amatya Rakshasa.
Okay. See, in the case of Malaiketu, though he was full of fury and wrath for Chanakya and Chandragupta and so on, it's obvious that in a very short course of time, the apprehensions of Malaiketu that Chanakya was responsible for his father's death, etc., they can all be dispelled. So, or at least he knows that he is utterly helpless now, that he cannot do any act of evil against Chanakya and Chandragupta. And also because, see, Amatya Rakshasa, who has now come over to this side, even his life has been spared and all that. And Malaiketu will be convinced that he cannot even think of doing any act of treason once again regarding Chandragupta. And Amatya Rakshasa himself, like his friend Chandanadasa, is known for his loyalty, and therefore there has not been a single act of Amatya Rakshasa all through his life where he has been ungrateful to a friend and has acted in a treacherous manner. And therefore, it is as though Chanakya and Chandragupta are certain that Amatya Rakshasa will show true loyalty to Chandragupta and Chanakya because he is known, Amatya Rakshasa is known like Chandranadasa himself. So he is known for his loyalty, and therefore he will remain loyal to. Only he was serving a wrong master earlier, and he realizes, Amatya Rakshasa himself realizes that, for example, Malaiketu was not really a trustworthy person or a worthy person to serve and so on. And on the other hand, he has seen the Vinaya of Chandragupta as also the courtesy of Chanakya, though Chanakya was quite strict in his demeanor and all that. So he knew where Dharma was. And had it not been the case, he would have tried to usurp all the powers of the kingdom himself. And even after arresting Amatya Rakshasa, he could have continued to have the hold of the reins of the kingdom would still be held in the hand of Chanakya, and that he was dispriha towards the power of ruling a kingdom, or he was a kingmaker himself, Chanakya was, and yet he would relinquish everything. So for the sake of ensuring that Amatya Rakshasa would be a good guide to Chandragupta. So this was the confidence that Chanakya reposed in Amatya Rakshasa. He knew about the integrity of Amatya Rakshasa, and among the various aspects of integrity, his loyalty was a foremost character, and he was no less brilliant than Chanakya. And that is why throughout the play we can see that nowhere does Chanakya try to be overbearing and claim to himself much more than what he had achieved or even what he had achieved. And he attributed it all to a positive fate, a favorable fate, rather than to his own accomplishments. And therefore, the atmosphere was very congenial for Amatya Rakshasa. Had it been the case that every now and then he would be insulted and embarrassed and so on, then once again the old enmities would burn in his heart, and therefore he would find it difficult to be there happily and would think of some plot or the other to finish them, or at least set himself free from their clutches and go elsewhere and so on. He was now very sure that Chandragupta and Chanakya would be very friendly towards him. Chandragupta was very obedient towards him, and Chanakya himself would actually no more try to continue there, because it was to resume his tapas that Chanakya would go, that he had planned to hand over the ministership to Amatya Rakshasa. And therefore, Amatya Rakshasa was very happy and comfortable in this new position. And therefore, there is no question of any worry on the part of anybody. Okay, any other question? So, thank you very much. We have come a long way. I had planned to be rather brief, but however, somehow felt that you must almost go line by line of this play. I can say that I have covered something like 90%. I have gone line by line. It's only in some cases where some verses were a bit descriptive and would require a lot of explanation because of the usage of an imagery that was common and current in the Sanskrit readership. That it would be easily understood, but otherwise it would require some explanation. And therefore, it's only such verses here and there that I might have skipped even partially. Even there, I've done it only, skipped only partially, but more or less we have covered the entire text. And I thank you all for the patient hearing of the series of lectures. Namaskar, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.